And waking up in Costa Rica as our country was starting a war just really impressed upon me what Costa Rica did in 1948 when they abolished their military to fund health care and public education. Last Saturday morning, like you, I woke up to war. Boy, that ticked me off. It made me depressed, angry. There's few things I hate more than war, and hate's a strong word, and I don't use it lightly. War's rather stupid. It's always seemed to me a big admission by human beings that we can't or won't solve our problems. It's just the worldwide bigger scale of a fist fight in a schoolyard or in a bar parking lot. And as foolish and childish as those things can be, war is too. So yeah, I was kind of down and angry, but not surprised. Unfortunately, like our ICE secret police, war is something most of us have just been expecting since this all started in earnest in 2016. And last Saturday morning, it stung a little harder, this news of war, because I woke up that morning in Costa Rica. I was there on the next to last day of 2 weeks studying Spanish. And waking up in Costa Rica as our country was starting a war just really impressed upon me what Costa Rica did in 1948 when they abolished their military to fund health care and public education. And their economy's struggling with still doing that now, largely because of the North American Free Trade Agreement that we kind of forced upon them. But the pivot that they made, the shift Costa Rica made all those years ago, is a reminder of how important centering your values, putting love at the very center essence of what you're doing, can make a difference. And the Ticos, as they're called, the Costa Ricans, are incredibly nice and generous people. And when I read all this about them, at first I thought it was at least partly tourism promotion. Who's going to say their people are grumpy and ogre-y and want you to go there? But it's one of those things in life that lived up to the hype. I think I encountered one person even in a bad mood in 2 weeks. And I'm sure there were, and I didn't see them, but that general attitude they call pura vida, pure life, is just something they really do exude, that life should be lived and enjoyed, and we should all take care of each other. So there's a different way to engage the world than what we're having foisted upon us lately. And I think it's important that we all remember that, because by us practicing it, that's how we make it come to be. So when I got home from Costa Rica late last Saturday night, I got up and went to church in Danbury, where I do the other weekend. And when I got home last Sunday, I started rewatching The West Wing. I see a lot of nods, so many of you are at least familiar with The West Wing. Okay, and for anybody who's not, it was a NBC network weekly drama from 1999 to 2006, written by Aaron Sorkin, about the West Wing of the White House, the president, people who work for him, and stuff like that. And the fictional president, Josiah Bartlett, was played by Martin Sheen. And there were a lot of really great actors in the cast: Rob Lowe, Allison Janney, Kristen Chenoweth, Maura Kelly, Jimmy Smits, Alan Alda, all were involved at some point. Loved the show when it was on. Were people regular watchers of that when that was on? I loved that show. And at first I thought it was, oh, The West Wing's on Netflix. Cool, I like that. But then I kept watching it like every day this week. And I realized that, wow, I really need to put myself in a world where fascists aren't running the government. So I did about an hour a day, every day this past week. And that world is not pristine or crystal clear. It's a real world portrayed in that drama. It is an administration of Democrats, but they often get stuck in the middle of the road on a lot of things between some deeply held values and what's politically achievable and what they might like to do and what they think they can do. But beyond the politics, what I realized throughout the week as I kept watching an episode or more every day, I think one day I watched 5. Yeah, it happens. But it occurred to me I was also needing this for what I wanted to say this week about the pivots. The show makes the point over and over again that the basic decency of people involved in anything, especially government, is what makes the difference. Not the system of government, not the political party, but the basic human decency of who's involved. And the writing of the show, I think, points out over and over again that there's a whole bunch of people working out of their heart, truly out of what works for them as love at the center, even people who are in the other political party. And how hard it is to work out political situations, even when your motivation is in a good place. I haven't gotten horribly far through this series. I think I got past the end of year 1 yesterday. But a couple of moments really stuck in my head that point out the heart center needed for justice and governing and living, that I think it's important we learn to keep pivoting back to. One of the White House staff gets a call from the DC police that a homeless man has been found dead in the cold with this person's business card in their coat pocket. So just following up, they're trying to see if this person on the business card might have had anything to do with this person. Well, it turns out the staffer had given the coat to Goodwill. And the person living on the street got the coat and the business card just happened to be in there. But by being called down to the scene, the White House staffer finds out that the man who died was a Korean War veteran and arranges a military honors funeral for him and has him buried in Arlington National Cemetery. In an episode looking back to when this president got elected, they win a big primary, everybody's happy, and then one of the staffers gets a call his father has just died. So instead of going to the campaign victory rally and giving a speech, the then candidate, Josiah Bartlett, goes to the airport to be with the man whose dad just died. When a staffer gets his butt handed to him by a Republican on a talk show, the president hires that person from the other party to be part of the administration. And they have to learn to get along with each other. And they start to learn some things from each other, shifting their thoughts and positions on some things, one side and the other. I have a hard time believing any of these things could happen in our current White House. But it reinforced for me this week that before the revolution of power and justice comes the revolution of the heart. That enough people have to have that revolution of the heart where kindness and decency and love are centered in order for that revolution of justice to happen. And in the TV show, in the West Wing, this administration is not perfect. These people are not perfect because people aren't. And that's really portrayed up front. They all have their human and personal struggles. They all struggle with doing what's right. Some of them do some things that are wrong. They struggle with conscience. They come to the breaking point because they realize that the struggle with their conscience makes things happen in the world. And they don't want to get it wrong. And they can't stand it when doing what's kind and right can't happen politically. And it shows us just how difficult governing really is and just how really horrible it is to treat it flippantly and casually. And although that made what's going on in the world seem a little harder to take, the fact that it can be done another way always makes me hopeful that we know we can get to that place. And the thing that comes through for me about our country in this show is that you can put love at the center of what you're doing in the world. And on the other side of this time we're in, we can realize that we can make what we want to have happen going forward happen. We can realize that everything really is a moral and political and personal issue all at the same time. We don't need to go back when this is over to the politics as they used to be. We can go back or go forward. And if we go forward, we can go forward into centering the question, what does love demand, not what do the powerful want in government? We can go forward centering the questions, what is right and just, not what makes the rich more money, at the center of government. Because what comes through to me in the writing in the West Wing is the mission of our country. That all people are created equal. That everyone deserves life and liberty and happiness. And this is the mission. And anybody who works in mission for organizations will tell you, any mission worth having is a mission you can fail at. And we failed at this mission over and over through our history. But one of the cool things about mission is it's mission that owns everything. Some people ask in church work, who owns the congregation? In our congregational polity, we'll say, well, the congregation, the people own the congregation. In Episcopal polity, they'll say the bishop owns the congregation. But those who work with mission will say, the mission owns the congregation. The mission owns our country. The mission owns the congregation. One of my favorite things through all the time I've been here about our congregation is the centrality of the mission. I do think the mission owns us here. And the longer each of us is here, I felt it myself. I get owned more by the mission the longer I'm here, because we actually really do try to keep it up front. To practice loving community, encourage spiritual growth, advance justice. Most groups, most congregations, most organizations will claim to have a mission. But it's been my experience that very few really live into it. And I see us doing that, and I think that's a great positive for us. that enables us to get through these difficult times and to make positive impact on the world. I hear people here actually use the words of our mission in meetings and in conversations and at coffee hour. That's an experience I haven't had a lot in other congregations I've served. And in our mission, I really love that practicing loving community comes first. Because that's the love at the center. That's the decency. That's the integrity. That if we are not loving each other, we can't encourage growth and we can't work for justice. And it occurred to me that what I love about the mission here and what I was getting out of rewatching this TV show this week were the same. It's putting the mission first and letting that value, that love, that decency guide the rest of it. It's the decency that guides us into justice. It's the decency and compassion that guide us to wanting to grow personally and as a group. And this is where my reading this morning comes in, the 4 pivots I've been reading by Sean Ginwright, who's professor of Africana Studies at San Francisco State. And his writing and research deals with young people navigating poverty and struggling to work for equality and justice and education. And his work is resonating with me because it's based and centered on healing and values. The way in Unitarian Universalism, we've gone from our 7 principles to centering what are the core values? How is love at the center? And he makes the argument that social change, creating the world we want to create, has to be centered in values, not just more equitable opportunity, not just better programs, not just more inclusion, but emotional healing and healing that's geared towards allowing people to put positive values like love and integrity and compassion at the center of what they do and how they live. And I just found that very compelling, especially with our mission here. And he says there are 4 pivots or shifts people and groups can make to live more out of their center, out of their values. One is awareness, shifting from an outward focused lens to an inward focused lens, taking a look at who you are as a person with agency in the world. The other shift deals with connection, moving from transactional relationships where I get something out of dealing with you and you get something out of dealing with me, to transformative relationships of how can we impact each other for the positive. Another shift has to do with vision, from fixating on the problem and what's wrong to dreaming, working for, and implementing solution. And the 4th shift or pivot he calls presence, to change things from that hustle mentality, get things done mentality, check things off the to-do list mentality, to just being present. It's part of our just not being able to be present to one another that allows some people to discount others as not human, to not care about what happens to people who aren't just like them. So I found his 4 shifts very compelling as I learned more about them. And he says there are 4 myths that get in the way of making these shifts. And one is the constant fight for justice. That justice has to be something that's a constant upfront struggle. And he says it's not that we don't need to fight for justice, it's that there's more to it than just the struggle. Because that mindset can lead to strategies that address issues or take victory in elections or a certain legal outcome, but in the end, don't create the desired value system undergirding things that allow those decisions or those victories to live long. and make effective change. So I thought that was an interesting idea. His second myth is that power will equal change. The idea that the more we have power, we have greater power to make changes that might need to be made. But just getting power isn't enough, because exercising power can be done without compassion and without love and without kindness by anybody once they have it. So it's just not enough. He's not saying these myths are always horrible. He's saying that they're enough on their own is something he thinks we don't pay enough attention to. The next myth is an us versus them mentality, that it's so easy to see others as separated from us, others who won't let other people be human. And it's hard to engage that. But if we discount them going back, we've done the same thing. And finding the roadmap there is not easy. It's extraordinarily difficult. But it's a myth that it can't be done. I believe we're smart enough to find a way to figure it out. And the last myth he talks about is that mobilization is key. Just activating enough people will bring about the necessary changes. And what that leaves out is we tend to mobilize people to change a law or to affect an outcome of an election, but we're not mobilizing people to change who they are and where their center is morally, so that the changes don't have as much of a lasting power. So I really like his ideas. They've just struck me as very useful right now, especially the idea that trying to do better in all these areas isn't an abandonment of what we've done or what's been achieved or progress that's been made. He uses the pivot. Are you familiar with the pivot in basketball at all? Where you've got to keep one foot planted so you can move, but you have a grounding at the same time. So if we learn to pivot better into our values, maybe we can start to achieve more. We keep something grounded in what's worked, what we've done, what has happened that has been successful, but we keep shifting around to get by those myths and continue to make more of those shifts and pivots. I really liked that. Ginwright says that when we pivot from just showing up to being present, for example, which I think our mission focuses on, the loving community first, that enables the other two parts to happen for us. The great impact in that comes not from the working so hard that we burn out to achieve what we want to do, but helps us stay energized and vital because we're building a relationship that can grow and continue to provide its own positive benefits. And it reminded me of Howard Thurman's theology of coming alive. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that, because the world needs people who have come alive. And we're alive and sustained in that by being in touch with ourselves, that shift to remember to look inward and not just outward all the time at the world's problems, but who we are can have an effect. We got to know who we are. And that shift to being present to others, that connection helps you come alive and the other person come alive. And the world needs people who are alive to make a difference. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember. What I'm noticing in the current resistance movement to tyranny is a moving away from Ginwright's myths and practicing those pivots more and more and more. We are fighting for justice, but it looks different a little bit. There's a confronting of injustice, but it's based on presence, not confrontation. the successful images we're having of the people singing in mass groups, of huge crowds surrounding ICE agents that would be abducting people. It's just being there that, strangely enough, is starting to be successful. I think the current movement is realizing that although more people have been included in society and there's been more power to those traditionally left out of power, we're still kind of fighting that same treadmill battle over and over again to achieve that. We make gains, we lose, we make gains, we lose. Because power doesn't equal change in itself. And it kind of struggling for power kind of sets up and continues this politics and culture of winning and losing instead of figuring out what the real problems are and trying to find real solutions to them. And within the resistance movement, what I've seen in the places I've been in Connecticut and Minneapolis is getting rid of like competing justice claims. Like right now, immigrants are being more harmed. Right now, trans people are being more harmed. Right now, people of color are being more harmed. What I'm seeing in those spaces is increasingly an understanding from those people that you who are being hurt in this way are my family, and we all help each other. And it's not that that hasn't gone on before, but in at least spaces I've been, I haven't seen it as visible and upfront as the way of operating as I have lately in the last couple months. I've also seen more and more people like myself, the old white cisgendered man, being decentered a little bit more. It's not perfect. It's not great. It's not where you want to be, but I've certainly noticed it in more of the spaces I've been, that there are fewer of those voices. And so we come into this time of life in our congregation. We're starting up our pledge drive. We're needing to get more people involved in helping us do things and run the congregation. We need to pivot once again. A few years ago, we got to our annual meeting. Some of you may not have heard this story yet, but was it 4 years ago now, I think? 5 years ago? We showed up to the annual meeting, and on the agenda was closing this place down. And then Nancy and Janet and Trish stepped up and agreed to take on leadership roles, and we've been doing pretty good since. You know, it's not easy peasy. It's not a struggle financially and otherwise, but we were averaging 12 people a Sunday when that happened. It's more than 12. So we're kind of at one of those points again. It's time for our next pivot, our next shift. How do we take that mission and shift so we can better practice it? Be there for yet more people. Make sure we continue and enlarge our sphere of influence in this community and each other's lives. I think there's going to be yet a new way and a new chapter of living our mission. And it starts with pivoting to find what's that next step in our loving community, being present to each other so we can all grow, so the congregation can grow, and so we can work better for justice. Because I think we're all agreed that, boy, does this world need it. Because this ain't the West Wing. Check out my website and blog at tonylorenzen.com for even more resources that will open your mind, touch your heart, and inspire your spirit.